Thank you, Hannah. And as you know, Solve is open for competitions, and so anybody in this room can prepare something to apply. So check their website, and you'll know more about it. So now it's time to introduce Pablo Castro. Pablo, are you here? Oh, okay, so he's there. He is a staff research software developer at Google Brain. So Castro, Pablo will speak to us about artificial intelligence and creativity. So Pablo is very well known in the artificial intelligence community. So he's probably one of the best Latin Americans doing AI. So Pablo, take it away and teach us how to do AI.
Well, you're about to be underwhelmed. That's a very nice introduction. I saw the sound wasn't working. I have a lot of videos with sound, so I have a backup in case I'll play it from my phone. So fingers crossed that the sound works. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's really a great pleasure and honor to be here. My name is Pablo. I work in Montreal. And so before I go into the stuff I'm going to be talking about, just very briefly a little bit about my background. I'm originally from Quito, Ecuador. And I moved to Montreal to do my undergrad and then eventually my master's and PhD. And after some stints in industry and a postdoc, I ended up in Google Brain, which is where I am now. And so my research, now I'm doing pure research, and I focus on two main things. The first is reinforcement learning, and the second is machine learning and creativity. So just very briefly in terms of reinforcement learning, I'm the main developer of Dopamine, which is this framework we released for doing reinforcement learning research. And it's been getting pretty good attrition. We have a bunch of published papers with it from not just our group, but other people in the community. We also do a lot of, in our lab in Montreal, we do a lot of fundamental reinforcement learning research. So understanding why the performance of certain algorithms like distributional reinforcement learning work as well as they do. I do a lot of work in building these metrics that allow us to compare states in a Markov decision process. If this doesn't mean anything to you, don't worry. If it does and you're interested, we can chat later. Because I want to now talk about my other line of research, which is this intersection of AI and creativity. So I'm part of this team that's also a part of Google Brain that's called Magenta. And it lives at this intersection of machine learning, AI, art, music, and creativity. And so our mission is to build tools both for technologists, for researchers, for musicians, for creatives, for artists that they can engage with. We release all our papers publicly. All our code is published openly. And we blog a lot. We give collabs and tutorials about this type of stuff because we really want to engage with the full community and not just keep everything for ourselves. So I'm going to give you a very brief and broad overview of some of the things we build at Magenta, and towards the end I'll talk more about some of my own projects. So one that I find really appealing is the music transformer. This was built by some colleagues, where we took a large data set of virtuoso piano players and trained a generative model to learn the patterns in those performances to then produce new music. So here is going to be the sound check. We'll see if this works. This is some, nope. Is it possible to start the video? And if it doesn't play, I can play it from my phone. Okay, perfect. So everything you're hearing right now was produced by the model. It was just told to produce some piece of music. This is using a network architecture called the transformer, which allows it to maintain long-term coherence when you're generating sequences of notes or text or anything like that. This transformer was released in 2017. It was published at iClear, I believe. And it was really revolutionary because previously, to generate these types of sequences, we used things like LSTMs, which had, the name says short-term memory, and it really was short-term memory, so it would kind of forget what it was singing about or talking about, and it wouldn't have this type of long-term coherence that we have here. I mean, if I played this to you and it didn't tell you a machine produced it, you might be tempted to think that it was actually made by a human. So that's very cool. We also do some other stuff. This was the project of an intern, Chris Donahue. And so he took one of these types of sequential models that are able to produce realistic sounding music, but he trained it in a way that he could interact with the model through the simple interface, kind of like Guitar Hero, where you have 10 buttons or 8 buttons, and you just play with those buttons. So you control the contour of the melody and sort of the shape, how many notes playing at the same time. And you'll see the piano play the notes for him. He just controls these buttons, if you wouldn't mind playing the video. So all of this is being generated in real time. And what's really cool about this is that it allows people that aren't musically trained to be able to express themselves musically. They don't obviously have all the complete control that a trained musician would have, but it still allows them to play with these contours and these shapes in a way that's musically sounding and doesn't require them 20 years of training. So another cool thing that we did with some of the models developed in Magenta is some of you may have seen this Google Bach doodle that came out last year. I love this project because it enabled people all over the world, millions of people played with this thing, to write melody, so basically forcing you to be creative musically, and then the machine learning model would harmonize the melody that you created using this model that was trained on Bach chorales. So the harmonization would end up sounding kind of like Bach. And so there's a quick video I found online that demonstrates this. So they took a pop melody, and then they sent it to the machine learning model, which will harmonize it, as you'll see here. And so you can still play with that online if you want to go play. It's super fun. We also released a data set with all the submissions that people made, because this is an interesting data set that you might want to run statistics or train new models on. Okay, so now I'm going to start talking about some of my own personal projects. This one is a project that I've been working with this singer-songwriter from Canada. He's fairly well known in Canada, David Usher. He approached us and he wanted to use AI to write a song. And so the first thing we started working on is something that could help him write lyrics. He doesn't really need help, but he wanted to sort of interact with these models. And so I built this using, again, this transformer architecture, trained a language model that you could feed in like the start of a line or the first line, which is what I have in bold here. And then the model would complete it. So these are some samples of lyrics that the model produced. So I generated a whole bunch of possibilities for David, sent it to him, and he spent a weekend looking through these possibilities, and he wrote one of his songs. So he had this song called Sparkle and Shine, and he rewrote the lyrics using the outputs of the model, sometimes exactly as is, sometimes modifying them a bit. And we call this Sparkle and Shine 2.0. For me, it was a success in terms of collaboration between a researcher and a musician. When I looked deeply into the model, though, I wasn't super satisfied, because the model tended to do this, where you'd feed in a line, and then it would just produce the same line over and over again. It would just repeat itself a lot. And we trained this model on pop lyrics, so it's not that surprising, because pop lyrics repeat themselves a lot. And so there were more problems with the data set. There were misspellings. The vocabulary wasn't super varied, because the vocabulary in pop songs isn't super varied. The themes weren't very varied. A lot of them were about parties and love songs and things like that. So I thought, well, why don't we take the same architecture and train it on a data set of fiction books, because there the vocabulary and the themes are a bit more varied. And so we got something like this. This is a sample. Yes, the vocabulary is more varied. It seems a bit more interesting, but it no longer looks like a song lyric. So it doesn't have the nice structure that we have on the left. So we have nice structure on the left, boring words, or no structure and more interesting words. So I said, why not do both? And so this is a project that I've been working on. I'm using now 2 different models. So I'm not trying to train everything with a single model, but I'm taking 2 models. The first one is trying to learn the structure of songs. So I'm not going to go too much into the details, but rather, instead of training on real words like we do here with this Led Zeppelin line, I'm converting the sentences or the phrases into the structure. And what I mean by structure is the number of syllables in each line, the parts of speech. These are things like nouns, verbs, adverbs, that type of thing. And then the last phoneme syllable. This is so that it can potentially rhyme. So this is the structure transformer. I trained another model called the vocabulary transformer. And the task of this one is trained on the fiction books data set. The task of this one is, rather than trying to predict the next sentence or the next half sentence in a data set of fiction books, it's going to receive the first part, which is going to use English words. This is going to give it the semantic context, so what the song is about. And it's going to receive the structure that is the same structure that we have from the previous model. And its task is to take this structure and this context and sort of fill in the blanks of this structure with real English words. And this is trained on the fiction books data set. So when we combine them, the way the system works is you feed in one line. So this is my first line, and you want the model to give you a suggestion for the next line. So we first convert it to its structure, send it to our structure transformer. That's going to give us the structure for the next line. We're going to concatenate it with our initial line for the context, send that to our vocabulary transformer, and then finally we'll get some line in return that hopefully works well with our system. So we generated a whole bunch of samples with this. As we can see, if we train only with the lyrics, we get this phenomenon that just repeats itself over and over again. With books, it just doesn't, kind of looks like a sentence that was split in random spots. But with our system, we get something that's kind of a happy medium in between. So we get the nice structure, a little bit of repetition, but not complete carbon copy. And we get even some rhymes like stranger danger or pocket delicate. Overall, we have some metrics as well to sort of justify this. It seems to be working quite well. I'm working on a tool that is going to be released in the next month or so, so that all of you can go and write the next top 40 hit and then become millionaires. So look out for that. Okay, so all that was really cool, but it required training these models and building these complex systems, which I had to go to get a PhD to know how to do. And so if you're a musician, you're not going to go do a PhD, or maybe you will, but most won't, in AI or machine learning to try to learn how to do these things. So a big part of my research is trying to investigate how can we take models that somebody else trained and use them in creative ways and integrate them as part of the creative process of performers or artists. So one way I've been doing this is a project I had. Normally I have a demo that I do with keyboard, but given the time constraints, I thought it would take up too much time. The idea is that I'm using these two relatively old models. One is to generate drum beats. So I built this kind of synthesizer thing where, so right now I'm just setting the tempo, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a bass line. And so from this bass line, I'm going to construct a deterministic drum beat, so no AI there. So this is the click track, and I'll record the bass line. And so then I can construct a drum beat over this that just matches it perfectly. So no machine learning there. But what now I can do is I can send this drum beat to one of these machine learning models that will produce a new drum beat based on what I gave it. And it's machine learning, so it doesn't always work perfectly, so it doesn't quite match the baseline. But this I find kind of exciting because it pushes you out of your comfort zone, and you have to sort of play around with it and get creative with it. So one thing you can do is that you can turn up the temperature, and this just makes it go really crazy. So you can kind of have fun with it. I use this for like drum solos. If you wouldn't mind skipping like a minute and a half of the video, is that possible? Yeah, if you go to like, no, yeah, so if you go to like 2:30 or something. There, a bit further. So it's a bit further back. Sorry. Yeah, there. So then the other thing I do is I have this other model that generates melodies. So what I do is I create this hybrid improvisation where when you see the robot, it's a hybrid of my rhythm that I play on the keyboard and the melodies that are coming from the machine learning model. The melodies are influenced by when my face is there, which I'm controlling everything. So you can see I'm playing the same note at the same key, and it produces different melodies. So this is really awkward to play with. It's really difficult to play with. And I've performed with this live with my jazz trio. And why do I do this? There's no reason to do this. I've been playing music all my life, more than I've been doing research. But the reason I'm excited about this is because as I said, it's difficult to do, and it's pushing me out of my comfort zone. So I have to navigate these difficult territories creatively using all the training that I've had as a musician. And so that for me is super exciting. And so these are the types of experiments that I'm running to explore this space. So finally, one other aspect I'm trying to open up into outside of music. Most of my research is in music, but I've been really interested in a lot of these visual arts that people produce, especially with things like GANs. And so this is what I'm going to talk a little bit about today. So the model I took is BigGAN, which some of you may have seen. This came from DeepMind about 2 years ago or so. It's a conditional model, so it's able to generate, all these images here are generated by the model. So you can say generate an image of a dog or this type of dog, and it'll generate this, or generate a hamburger, and it'll generate images that kind of look like that. What really intrigued me about this paper is that when you train these models, you can do these interpolations, that you can basically go from a shark to this dog here and have that happen smoothly. And so there's people have made videos of this, and you can see them on Twitter and things. I found them super compelling and super interesting, and quite, they have a narrative to them. So I was interested in exploring how can we use this as part of a creative process. And so what I did is I took an audio file, like a video from the music from a video, or just some recorded audio, and I extracted the fast Fourier transform of this, the spectrogram here. And then from this spectrogram, I can take for each slice the L1 distance with the next slice and construct this one-dimensional signal here. So I have this algorithm that tries to find these inflection points, so when the signal changes enough. And each of these inflection points will then be a category of this BigGAN. And so now, using these inflection points, I can construct this signal that basically draws a path through the latent space of this big GAN, which then basically produces an automatic video for you. So I did this with this arrangement of a song I made. So I took the audio of this video, and what you see on the left, that's generated automatically by the big GAN. So if you wouldn't mind fast forwarding to 1:28, 1 minute 28. Yeah, there's fine. So you can see the movement kind of matches. This is interpolating between like a lighter and a lighthouse or something. I really like silences because then you get funky things like you'll see here. So I've been generating a bunch of these videos, and now I'm starting to explore outside of music, how can you use it, for instance, in a narrative setting. So I created this story about this character. Oops. Can we go back? Yeah. Do you mind playing that video? About this character called Gandhi. And so I basically created the narrative of this and the categories I chose manually.
The story of Gandhi. Gandhi started as a ball of cells and was then born in a hospital. No, he was not brought by a stork. As a child, he grew up in a farm, was afraid of sharks, but loved his puppy. He always wanted to see an axolotl. Like any Canadian, he grew up playing hockey in the winter.
So you can see the categories match what I'm saying. This was picked manually. But one of the things I'm interested in is using things like BERT encodings or something. So you can do speech recognition, detect the words, pass that through a BERT encoder, and then find the closest categories and generate all of this as a end-to-end pipeline. What I'm also super interested in is in music performance, for instance, have this happen in real time so that whatever's being generated is being affected by what I play, but then also what I'm playing is being affected by what I'm seeing in the screen. So it's this closed feedback loop where it's a true interaction between an artist and a machine learning model. So I'm almost out of time. I'm over time. So just very briefly, there are so many models and techniques coming out right now. It's a really, really rich space right now. And I think people like myself that live at this intersection of the creative space and the technical space, I really like inhabiting this triangle of AI, art, creativity, and exploring what's possible, not just from a scientific perspective, but also from an artistic perspective. And so thank you very much. This last video is using StyleGAN, which is another GAN produced by NVIDIA. It's trying to reproduce my face as best as it can. It's never seen my face and still does a pretty good job. Thank you.